And you're up.
All right. Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to virtually be here. Let me share my deck. It's going to be quite light on the deck. Can you let me know if you can properly see it?
Looks good from my end.
All right, excellent. So before we dive into it, I'll quickly introduce myself. The least interesting part of the session. So my name is Jaap. I've been around in the PowerShell world for quite some time. I love to automate things and to use PowerShell mainly for this purpose. In my daily life, I'm a developer advocate, so that ties in nicely with my love for automation. Do a lot of stuff on GitHub, and I can already say it now. If you have any questions, either in regards to what we cover in the session or just want to chat about PowerShell in general, you can always hit me up on Twitter. Then I'll actually get some notifications, so that's always nice. And with that, because of the content that we have today, I decided to go for a low amount of slides approach and maximum amount of code, because we have a lot of code to cover today. So with that, no more slides, and let's go take a look at the code. So with that, let me set it over to this. Yep. So now you should be able to see my VS Code. Is that one clear for everyone, or just for the first person to respond?
Looks like it's still loading the resolution for me. That might just be on my end though. So if other people are saying it's good, then we're good.
Okay.
It's ever so slightly blurry, perhaps.
Okay. I see good, very good, maybe a little bit blurry. What I'll do is I'll zoom in a bit. Perhaps that will make it better. Slightly better, much better. There we go. And
Great.
So the way I'm going to go to this. The way I'm going to go to this, I'll have a number of issues that I've run into in the past, or that I just found interesting to fix with PowerShell, and then we'll just go over the code examples and see how it works and see what kind of interesting behavior there is, if there is any. So one of the things that was introduced in PowerShell 7 that I'm very happy with is that for each object can now run multiple tasks in parallel. So for example, if we have 1 to 5, so if we type 1 to 5, we would get an array from 1 to 5, and then for each object we're going to say hello and then the number of the run. But we put a sleep in there for 1 second just to indicate that a long-running job would take. It would take 5 seconds to execute everything. But starting from PowerShell 6, the parallel switch param is available. So if we do it like this, it would execute in a single second. And the neat thing is that if you would execute it like this, so what I've added now is I added some randomness in here. And we can see that even if we have a random delay in there, it still manages to put the output out in the correct order. The downside is that it doesn't. It depends on the kind of output you're working with. So, for example, if you would use an external tool, so ping.exe, and we do this without parallel. And if you go to this, then Microsoft doesn't allow us to ping, so this one will time out. And all the other requests obviously have to wait for the previous ping request to finish. Now, if you would run this with parallel, it does attempt to filter it, but we can see that because things are running parallel, the different ping requests do end up mucked together. So the point that I'm trying to make here is when you're running tasks parallel, make sure that the tasks are actually able to run in parallel, and that the output is still going to be the way you expect it. But all in all, it's quite a neat bit of functionality. A very common use case for this for me would be, for example, if you're doing anything against a huge data set. So if you have a list of server names that you want to execute tasks against, you can run this in parallel without having to work with start Jaap. If you would want a similar behavior to what you were able to do with start Jaap, you can run it with as Jaap, and you can also process it in the same way with wait Jaap, and then eventually receive the job. So then you'll be able to run it as a background task. Cool. Yeah. As mentioned before, if there's anything unclear or you'd like to see more about it, just let me know in the chat. Otherwise, I'll keep on trucking. So let's start with some binary. So in this case, we're going to convert this into a binary string. So hello California, let's do some binary. You can see the string here. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign it to binary. So now we have a variable with binary in there. And we'll now also convert that back into regular text. So converting that is relatively easy. So we first cast it as an integer, and then in the same for each statement we also convert it into a character. So we do this. You can see hello California. Let's do some binary. Now, if we wanted to join this again, we can grab this around in an array, and we have some spaces in between. So if we want to get rid of the spaces, we could also change the join statement to be before binary, and then we don't have to specify a join character either. So it's a quick one. If you want to go back and forth between binary, it's quite easy to do in PowerShell. So another one that was something that I've run into in the past quite a bit has been whether your PowerShell process is 64 or 32-bit. So even if you're running on a 64-bit system, it's still possible to run a 32-bit PowerShell instance. So there's actually, if you're using Windows PowerShell, there's actually two different PowerShell.exe available. So there's one in System32, which is 64-bit, and in Syswo. And if we want to establish whether your PowerShell process is 64-bit, there's an environment variable available. So I'll run this my client now. You can see that this one is indeed a 64-bit process. But now we'll run it in the different versions of PowerShell. So in my case, it's 2 versions of Windows PowerShell and PowerShell 7. And we can see that if we run this 32-bit PowerShell, that it's indeed 32-bit. There's other ways to do this as well. We can also look at the pointer size. So depending on the amount of bits that are available, we can also determine which if we're running in 64-bit. Another cool one is to quickly change drive ladder. Starting WMI is very commonplace around when you're working in Windows. So one of the things that you can do with getSim instance, you can query for a drive ladder. So in this case, query for drive ladder E. And if I wanted to change the drive ladder, we can simply specify an argument. And by specifying a new drive ladder, we would actually change the drive. Unfortunately, this is my production system, so I'm not going to actually change my drive ladder because I don't know what I'll break then. But if we would run this, we can see that we get back our drive. And you can see with this one-liner, we can simply change the drive ladder on the fly. All right. Launching other applications from PowerShell. So PowerShell is more than just a scripting language. You don't just want to use it to write your scripts in. One of the other things that that I often use it for is to directly launch my applications. So an example of this is if I want to open up any files or any external applications, what I can do is I can run invoke item. Let's see. Unfortunately, this file does not exist, but if it would exist, then it would open up. It would open up this file with the default handler. So in case of JPEG, it's in my case Windows Photo. If you open up an Excel sheet, it will open it up in Excel. There's a nice shorthand for this as well. So let me take a look what we do actually have in here. All right, so X. So if I wanted to open this up, then I can do, for example, file.pdf, and by running this, it would open up this PDF. This also works for URIs. So if we want to open up the PowerShell gallery, we can run start process, and it will open it up in the default browser. And let me just drag that in there. You can see that it opened it up, in my case, in Chrome. Another option is if I want to open up Windows Explorer in the current path, I can do that by putting the dot there. And what I frequently use it for as well is if I want to open up either a folder or I want to open up a file, we can just run code for VS Code to directly open that. So if we want to get some help in PowerShell, we obviously have the get help command set, but get help never includes the information for example, for the .NET classes. But this is something that we can quite easily do by creating a function that wraps around start process, and we can open up the help page for whatever we're looking for. For example, if we want to get more information about Windows Forms, we can open up this path, and then we'll get information about this class. And the reason I pointed out this class is because it's a nice example to easily create GUI applications or any kind of GUI interaction within PowerShell. So let's get to that. So if we want to work with Windows Forms, the important thing is obviously that we are actually within Windows, because this would not work cross-platform. So what we do is we're going to load the system.windows forms assembly, pipe that to out null, and as an example, we can open up Windows form file dialog. But a more interesting one is to just create our own custom form. So we'll do that with this one. And so what we do here is we use the show method, and in there we can specify a number of arguments. Do note that whenever you're using .NET classes, it will always be limited to unnamed parameters, so it's always based on the location. So if we want to take a look at what we can fill in here, I'll run this. You can see that we get the overloads of this method, so we can get an idea without having to go online and reading through the documentation what it expects. So in this case, we have the string, which is the text, a caption, and then which buttons we want. So if I would run this, it should be behind. That's too bad. I'll kill my console. I briefly saw it pop up behind, but I'll just restart the PowerShell extension. But this is a very easy way and pretty lightweight. If for some reason your script would require user interaction and you want it to look slightly better than with in-shell questions, it can be a quite easy way to do it using either Windows Forms, or another one is out grid view. So out grid view has been around in PowerShell for quite some time, and recently it was also released for PowerShell 6 and 7, because initially it was scrapped for PowerShell 6. And then over the summer of, I think, 2018, but it might have been 2019, the Microsoft PowerShell Graphical Tools module was created, which I have available here. So what that gives us, if I do get process, then obviously I'm going to get a lot of information. If I pipe that into out grid view, it pops up behind my console, but let me get that into screen. We can see that we now have out grid view available here, and we can also filter by all the different criteria here. So if, for example, I want the ID to be less or equal than 1, you can see that we only have the idle process. So out-grid view is a nice way to make the data visible, to make it scrollable, and to go to provide some user interaction. So you can also use this to give a choice or to select which data you want. So, for example, what we have here, you can see that we can put a title in here. So in this case, the title is just the code that's there. So we have the choice, yes or no. And if I do yes, it will go to the if statement, and yes, it will say, let's do it. So we can create a simple interaction in a GUI, regardless of the operating system, as long as this module is installed. So another one to get into is there's in Windows there's a lot of COM objects available, and what I always struggled with was to be able to determine how many and which COM objects are available, especially when you're working with different Windows versions interchangeably. It can be hard to determine if a COM object is going to be available. So the nice thing is that we can pull this information. We can pull this information out of the registry. Not running this in. See this. Set that. And there we go. So if we want to take a look at which classes we have available, you can see that we get a complete list alphabetically with all the COM objects that are available on this system. So let's do a quick check. Not object. So we use measure object to get a sum of the total. And we can see that in my case, in this version of Windows 10, with my installed software, I have 1171 objects available. So when is this useful? Well, if, for example, you're expecting there to be a Word COM object or an Excel COM object because you want to do some manipulation using that. It can be useful to check which ones are available, and not only that, there's also more information available in there. Let's see if I go up a little bit. It's already gone, but it also gives you version information, so you can dive deeper. You can dive deeper into it by looking into the registry. And I understand that it's a bit of code, but all of the code that I'm sharing in this presentation will be available later on for everyone to use. I'm not sure. Is there a GitHub account, or how do we usually share these things?
If you have this in GitHub, I usually send the link out. If you don't, we do not have a GitHub account, but I could create one and host this there if that's preferred by you. You know, whatever works.
Oh yeah. So I have my own GitHub, so I can just link you. I can link you afterwards with this.
Cool.
And yeah, because we were already talking about COM objects. One of the COM objects I mentioned was Word. So let's take a look. You can see that there's a number of files available here. Let me just switch this one out. And what I'll do is I'll make sure that everything there is okay. Yeah, good. So let's go take a look at what we have here. So we have file.docx. So I just put a simple PowerShell in here, and to make sure that we can see that this works as expected, I'll just make this one. So then what we'll do, there's a couple of steps here that I placed in this in these lines of code. So first, we're going to create a Word COM object. We're going to tell it to open up a document and then immediately save it again as a PDF using the references that in this case it has to be 17 because that's the one for PDF. And then after that, it will close the application again. Let me change the file name. So change it to 123. You can see that it actually works the way we think it does. And we'll give this a second. So look, we can see that it just created this file. To open it up. So we can see with a couple of lines of code, we can now programmatically convert a Word document directly into PDF. So obviously for a single document, there's not much of a use case for it, but what I like to do with all the presentations and all the sessions that I give, whenever I have a PPTX, I just go to my, I went to my entire repository and just converted it all to PDF because that's better suited for GitHub, because GitHub actually knows how to display PDF and it doesn't know how to display PPTX. So you can easily run this against an entire folder and just do a quick conversion of that into whatever formats you'd like. So that's a neat one. You should know that this is only available if you are on a system that actually has Word installed. There's other ways to do it using external modules with external DLLs. And a great one for that for Excel is the import Excel module. I think it's called import Excel. And that one's created by Doug Fink, and with that one you don't have any external dependencies. Yep, import Excel. Any external dependencies, and you can run it within CI/CD pipelines as well. So we've already done some binary before. So instead of some binary, let's do some base 64 now. So what we did with binary, we simply used the character, throwing it to from a string to an integer to a character. So in this case, what we'll do is we'll convert back and forth between base 64. You can see we have this array. I'll put it in here. So if we want to, if we convert it, want to convert it back, can see that this is once again a binary string. If we want to throw binary back to base 64, then we can join it again, and we can see that we've now gone from a string to base 64 and then back again. So then another interesting one with PowerShell. Most people are aware that there's a history in there. So if I type H, get the PowerShell history, which in this case is everything that I've run so far. So the history itself is already quite useful, because whenever I'm giving a demo, or I quickly want to show something to one of my colleagues, we can just jump on a team session. We can talk about the different code. I can show a couple of commands, and then what I can do is, for example, I think the last 5 commands were mostly interesting for my colleague. I can index into it, so we can see I've now selected the last 5 commands, and then we can either choose to export it, or I can just select command line. We would get the actual commands, and in this case we also get the commands we just typed. And let me get it there as well. And we can also directly paste it either into clip.exe, or we can set it to the clipboard. So then you can easily just copy paste your last couple of commands that you executed in PowerShell. So in this case, I would get it. See that we have the last commands in here. So another one that I like, that's for example, if I know that command number 16, we can see this one. Okay, and I would like to execute this one again. One of the ways we can do this, we can obviously press the up arrow until we actually get there, but that does take a bit of time, and we want to do it more efficiently. So this one was number 15. So we can also do, I forgot what this character is called. Yeah, I don't know what the character is called.
Guess the hash symbol, probably.
Yes, the hash symbol. Thank you. You can just do hash and whichever number you use there, and then if I press tab, it will expand it to that command. So whenever you want to go back to a command, hash pound, I see from Neil, thank you. You can just expand the command, and in this case, it's not very long, but it also works with multi-line, and it's quite useful if you want to repeat longer commands and you don't want to switch back and forth. So the downside of history, so in this case I used H because it's shorthand for it's an alias for history, and we can also do get history, get commands and look for history. Unfortunately, there's a lot of AZ commands as well. So we have get history, invoke history, and but I would have thought there was also export history. Interesting that the one isn't there. And you can also clear your history for your current session. But it doesn't transfer over from one session to the other. So if I would open up a fresh PowerShell window, if I do get history here, you can see there's no history. If we do it now, then the first command would have been get history. So for that, we have a nice module available, and that's PS readline. It's also what provides us with the cool colors in the console. We can see that I have this one loaded, and because of that, we also have the Ctrl-R command. So if we do Ctrl-R, it's going to search through our history. So if I wanted to look for something like get history, or in this case, it defaults to get module. But if I type the H for history, it will search through previous entered commands, and it will search through it in chronological order. So the most recent command is the first that's going to pop up. And if I'm satisfied with the command I found here, I can tab it and then just run the command again. And going back to VS Studio Code. So this is done by storing your history to a history save path, and that is something to be aware of. So in this case, for VS Code, it's Visual Studio Code host history. If I take a look here, we can see that in this case, this is for PowerShell, and then there's also one for VS Code, and that contains my that will contain every command you've ever entered into a PowerShell console. So this is something to be aware of, because if you ever entered in sensitive information, passwords, or you accidentally copy-pasted something into PowerShell, it might actually be stored and logged. And that will also be available for anyone else who either has administrative rights to your system, or if you happen to have left your system unlocked, available to anyone. And I have actually seen this when people left their computers unlocked, that someone just quickly grabbed their PowerShell history just to grab any sensitive information out there. And it's pretty quick to do. I mentioned flip.exe or set clipboard. By doing this, we can, well, in this case, I would have to get the content from the file, set that to clipboard, and then you have all the history that what someone ever executed, or at least by default, it's the last 4,096. 96, yes, 96 commands that were executed. So be aware that this exists. If you work in a sensitive environment, probably either disable PS readline or disable saving the history. So if you're running on Windows, which I expect most of us are, then you might be aware that we have Windows Defender. So Windows Defender is quite nice, because we can use this to directly run scans from PowerShell. So let me just go for, let's just scan our folder here. And the files that I've created here. So you can see it will, with a single line of code, we can specify which path we want to scan, and we can either run this as a PowerShell job, or we can run it interactively like we just did. So everything everything is also logged. So if you want to get more information about what happened, we can dive into the log file, and we can see the start and the end tasks. And we can also see my glorious computer name, because we can use Unicode in computer names. It's usually not advised, but since it's my computer, I get to choose what characters I put in there. Do note that Unicode characters, they are not properly displayed when you're using the standard PowerShell, the standard PowerShell con host. So all Unicode characters display neatly when you're either using the integrated console in VS Code, or if you're using the newer Windows terminal. So this one was the Windows terminal. This one, let's see the computer. This one would render properly, but for example, hostname.exe would not know what to do with it. So that's something to be aware of. If you're working in an international environment where you could have Unicode characters in your file names or in any of the data that you work with, then it might be advisable to upgrade to the Windows terminal, because or any other kind of console emulator. Sweet. So another one that I got into in the past, if we want to validate that a local credential is correct, there's a couple of different ways that we can do this. Let's see. Got Justin saying it's blurry. Justin, what I heard other people say is that if they minimize the chat, then the blurriness is gone. Let me know if that one works for you as well. Yeah, no problem at all. But I do agree. I sometimes have it with Teams as well, where it doesn't load a certain stream. I haven't found a good solution for it yet either. So let's load up this function. So we have test local credential, a couple of values we throw in there: username, computer name, and password. You can already see that it's very upset because it wants it to be a secure string, which would be a good idea, but it would also complicate testing the creds. So in this case, we can run this against this user. So in this case, username Jaap. And this one should fail. Yep. And don't think I actually created this. I don't actually think I created this user. All right. Local users. So, well, there we go. Let's disable that option. Let's not change it. There we go. So you can see we already got an exception. So it did want to test the credential, but it wasn't allowed to because the password has to be changed. So I disabled that option, and then we can see that when we have a password that's when we have a password that's incorrect or a user that doesn't exist, it will take a bit longer. If the credential is correct, then it will come back rather quickly. So this can be useful if you want to test a credential without entering it in, or if you have more nefarious purposes, you could also do it to test a lot of passwords. And you can imagine that if you use for each parallel, that you can parse to a password list quite quickly. Similarly, it also works for in a domain context. So in this case, I've selected my local machine. Also, I'm not domain joined, but you could also do it on the domain level. There's a couple of different ways to do it. I prefer this method because it actually gives us back true or false. It's not the fastest way to do it, but it's a neat way to just quickly check if a password is going to be correct. So then, if you want to check things with DNS, so if you want to get back, for example, the host entry for Microsoft.com, you can use the system.dns class, get host entry. You can see we get back a number of addresses, both IPv6 and IPv4. And there's a lot of methods available. If you want to take a look at that, you can see we get a nice autocomplete here. So you can see that we can query for different things, either by host addresses, names, or entries, depending on what you want. You got a full list there. You can also get that like this. We can get the entire list of methods that are available on this particular runtime. So it's a quick way to validate in a PowerShell way to whether the addresses are what we expect them to be and if they're actually going to be there. With that, we've reached the last example. So I think I'm going pretty good on time here. So one of the things that I have to say it was more often in the past than nowadays, but I think it still happened last year, is the spam messages that you might be familiar with on the old MSM messenger, and it has since migrated to Skype. Is that you get a funky URL that kind of looks like something like this with a % signs in there. So this is a similar kind of encoding compared to the binary encoding. Only these are hexadecimal values rather than integers. So let's load up this function. And let's take this long URI. This is, by the way, no longer a method that works. So in the past, you could just put anything behind URL at Google, and it would just instantly redirect you there. I'm happy that Google decided to remove that, but we can still extract the URL from this. So if we convert this back, we can see that we get the decoded URL. So without having to click the link, you can actually convert a percent encoded link into something that's more human readable. This is something that I did out of interest because I didn't want to actually open up spam links to find out where they would lead me. But the curiosity was still there that I wanted to know where I would go had I clicked it. So with that, let me just switch myself back. Get out of this one. With that, I would like to open it up for questions. So we went through a lot of code here, a lot of different examples. So does anyone have any questions about this?
We are right. That was a lot of examples. Oh, there we go. There's one in chat.
So can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to be a dev advocate working with PowerShell? Do I mostly work with Windows? I work a lot with Windows, but I don't mostly work with Windows. One of the first things I did in my current role was actually to make sure that some of our main modules would be cross-platform. Most of the stuff works out of the box if you want to run it on Mac or on Linux, but there were some oddities that we had to iron out before making it fully cross-platform. I do work with PowerShell. I wouldn't say I mostly work with PowerShell. I do still spend a fair amount of time with PowerShell, and what it's like, pretty fun. So for all the code, what I'll do after I drop it off, I'll put it up on GitHub, and it will be up here. Make it HTTPS. So it will be up in there. There will be a subfolder in there named SoCal. I'll share that link. I'll share that link with you so you can share it out in the email blast or on the meetup link.
Cool.
So all the code will be available there. Can you code in all uppercase? So is your question, will it matter if you write everything in uppercase? Yes, you can code in all uppercase. If, for example, you would want to change some your code or an existing string to uppercase, there's a to upper class available. So if you have Jaap, you could do this. I'm typing in the chat now. You could change it to upper, or if you have it in uppercase or in mixed case, then you can do to lower. These are methods that are available on .NET strings and thereby also on PowerShell strings. In most cases, it doesn't matter if you use uppercase or lowercase, but coming back to the cross-platform, Linux and especially Linux file system is very sensitive to case. So in that case, it would matter. Does that cover your question, Stephen? Cool. Yeah, so Ryan mentions that string comparisons are case insensitive in PowerShell. Yes, that's true, but it depends. If you do a string comparison, for example, with dash equal, there's also dash C equal and dash I equal. And C equal is case sensitive, and I equal would be insensitive. It's just that the default is set to insensitive, and you can also change that behavior of all these comparison operators to something different. But by default, it is indeed case insensitive. But if you would explicitly specify case sensitive equals, then it would be case sensitive. And this doesn't just go for equals, but also for match, for example. Let's see. I'm not sure what you mean by case sensitive with quotes. Let's see, favorite part about PS6 that doesn't exist in Windows PowerShell or PowerShell 5.1. That's a good one. The one that I'm the happiest with in my day-to-day work is that the web commandlets for PowerShell 6 have been greatly improved, starting from PowerShell 6. So the JSON conversion actually works, because this is something that was suboptimal on Windows PowerShell. I know a lot of people are not happy with the simplistic display of errors, because they give less information in PowerShell 7. But I actually think it's quite neat. And if you do get error, it will still get you all the information that you want of the last error. Let's see. So that would be get error last one would get you your last error. Yeah, Neil also points out that it doesn't need use basic parsing anymore. Yeah, one of the things with Windows PowerShell, when you're using invoke web request, you actually had to start Internet Explorer. If you didn't start Internet Explorer before running invoke web request without use basic parsing, it would ask you to start Internet Explorer, which is that isn't fantastic default behavior. So I see Justin added to it. So web commandlet for each parallel and Gusto style pipelines, classes from Oscar. I have to say that I agree with Justin here. Classes in PowerShell are quite basic. Usually, when I get to the point where I want to use classes in my PowerShell code, then I gotta use .NET classes than PowerShell classes, as they're more limited. so whenever I'm writing PowerShell, pure PowerShell code, I just stick to custom objects. But there's definitely advantages to using classes over that. But from a simplicity point of view, which is usually the reason why I'm using PowerShell in the first place, I don't end up using custom classes in my PowerShell scripts or modules. Sorry, I think you might as well mute Justin. Okay, no problem at all. Yeah, so as Justin shows, you can put the pipeline character on the new line. Previously, what it would be is that you could use the pipeline character as a line break, but now it can be now it can be on the new line as well. It's also a great way to ensure that people are on a recent version of PowerShell, Justin, because if you do that, you will definitely break backwards compatibility. Yeah, and for the folks that are not using PowerShell 7 or yet, the big advantage of it is because it's a separate download now, and it's open source. You can just download the zip file, just extract it. Even if you don't have administrative rights on your system, you can still get PowerShell on there. So it's it's quite easy to get up and running nowadays. Yeah, and do definitely check out that link by Justin. Justin is a great presenter, so go check that one out. No problem. Well, for anyone here, if you do come up with more questions, either use the PowerShell hashtag on Twitter or reach out to me directly there. So I am Jaap _Brasser because I was late to the Twitter party, so I couldn't get my my own name.
I'll make sure
That's
to
it.
include that in the email I send out with your code link too.
Yep.
Cool. I'll go ahead and stop the recording and we can continue discussing.